Alrighty, so today what we're going to do is we are going to do a contact form for your website. So if you, like I got the question from you earlier, you know, hey, are you wanting to send an email? Is that what you were?
I had an email sign up. It's like a sign up for my email list.
Okay, so that kind of thing, depending on how you do it, how is your email list run?
Yeah, looks like that's probably just going to go into the database and we'll just send that.
Yeah, so that kind of thing, you would use then a form to send somebody's email address into a database, which we're going to talk both the methods. So that would be the post method versus the get method, et cetera. But we're not going to write to a database today. Oh, you do? Okay, so the HTML. Okay, great. So yeah, what we're going to do today is we are going to, if I go to faculty, Washington, and I go to my demo, a contact form for your website, and I go to contact.php. Basically what we're going to do is do something like this, where if I typed in my name, typed in Mike, K-U-L-A, make sure I spell that right, .com, subject, message, hey, and then I don't know what else to say besides that, and I submit message, then we should get a confirmation message saying, hey, thank you for contacting me, Mike. And if I were to go to my inbox here, I should have an email from Mike at Mike's and Kula, stupid inquiry, and a bit, and an email that has the subject stupid inquiry and that says Mike, email address Mike at mikesandkula.com, wrote, hey, right? So if you want an email or a form on your website that just, you know, hey, contact me, instead of actually putting an email address on your website, because does anybody have any type of thing where they've done something like this, where you actually have on your website a live email address like that? I suggest you don't do that because the amount of spam that I get, especially, hey, do you need SEO services? We're a firm, blah, 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 right? I get those. I get tons of those. But I've just left that there. Why? I don't know, because I'm a masochist or something like that. But instead of having an email address like this, that if I click on an email address like that, what it'll do is it'll allow you then to send an email. But if you want something that you just have a form that doesn't have your email address so you don't get tons of spam, you can set up a little form on your website and have input fields for things like name, email, subject, message, etc. And then if we go to the code here, let me kind of just show you before we begin typing this out. Let me just show you the two parts of a form like this. So we are using PHP to then actually send and receive or send the email to our inbox that we will receive. So The first part right here, let's bump that up a bit, is the actual form, okay? And notice then that form has an action applied to it. So this action right here, basically what that does is it will then or when you hit submit, it will reload this page. And if you have, so if I do this, right, now that I've submitted this form once, if I go to and hit the refresh button, it's going to say, the page you're looking for used information that you entered. Returning to that page might cause any action you took to be repeated. Do you want to continue? So what's actually happening is, when I put, or when a user puts information into the input fields and the message field like that, that then is considered to be post data, okay? Meaning that if and when we do hit the submit button, okay? So here is the actual HTML form. And up here then is the script, the PHP script that is responsible for actually sending the email, okay? So this form, or excuse me, this script then starts out with an if conditional. And that if conditional basically is a test to say, has somebody clicked on the submit button, okay? If is set post variable submit, right? In other words, we are using the post methodology, right? Sending versus getting, okay? And once we hit submit, then this script looks to see if somebody has put in their name, somebody has put in their email, a subject. It will send an email to my UW email address. It will then say it's from, etc. This function right here, the mail function, will actually is the function that is responsible for actually sending the mail through the server to the recipient with a subject, with a message, and from a sender. When we do submit this form, it also then prints a little thank you message to the screen so that, again, one of Jacob Nielsen's heuristics, visibility of system status. Familiar with that one? Yes, no, you guys have done heuristics? Okay, so how many of you have ever done something on a form or done something, submit something, and you're like, is anything happening? Because there's no messaging of what is happening, right? So visibility of system status then says, hey, this went through, thank you for contacting me, okay? So if I then want to reload this as a blank form, then I would have to hit the contact. In other words, I would have to reload this page fresh versus reloading this page with that saved post data from the forms in it. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, two parts to the form, or two parts to the application, if you will, in terms of the actual HTML that we set out. And then in order to actually send it, we need some kind of a scripting language, a server-side language that will send it through the server. And we are just going to use PHP because that's what we're doing versus something like ASP or any other language like that. Okay, so if we then go to the one lecture for today, understanding forms. So we have basic tags that are for using forms. So forms typically start out by using the form tag, right? And then there is an action and a method applied to that, okay? So the action is basically where, when you submit, where does it send you, okay? It could send you to an entirely different page, right? So if you submitted some kind of form data, like logging into a website or something, it will then possibly send you to wherever you need to go because you logged into that website, okay? So that's how this action section would work. Then again, there are two methods, post and get. So we are going to be using the post method. In other words, we are using the methodology of sending something through the server or sending something to a database, right? So for yours, you would be using post to send that information to the database that would then be stored in the database. If we were using the get methodology, for instance, which we're not going to use today, let's say if we were logging into an account, right? It would use the get methodology to go see if that is the correct data in the database, right? To then do whatever kind of action it needed to do. Does that make sense? Okay. We then have basically input boxes, okay? Or input fields. The input fields may just be as simple as text fields, right? In other words, whenever you see something like this where you're going to put text into a field, that then uses the input tag, okay? So let's actually go to create your form text field, looking for the link, input tag, okay? So the input tag, then basically, there are different types of input tags. The most common is input type text, right? Where you put your name in, okay? But then, and also, we are going to use the name attribute, okay? So when we use the name attribute, in other words, if I say, if we have a form that has an action that basically then has two input fields, first name, last name, input type text, meaning that we are just typing in normal text, right, into the input. And then instead of an ID or a class, right, we're going to use the name attribute. And the name attribute is going to be that hook that then the script uses. So let me say it like this. So on this form that we are going to do, let's say if we have an input field, right, and it is type text, and we have the name attribute, and the value of the name attribute is name, meaning this one right here. So if I inspected this, you would see here that this input field has the name attribute and the value is name, type, text, required, required. So we are also going to use HTML5 to validate this field, meaning if I went to this form now and I tried to submit message, it's going to say, hey, please fill out this field, right? So well, let's say before HTML5, to do validation like that, we needed to run heavy-duty JavaScripts or heavy-duty PHP scripts to actually see if the value of that field was empty or not. Okay, so HTML5 has come around and it's going to say, hey, you need to please fill out that field. Oops, going back here. But notice that on these inputs, there is the name attribute, and each one, and even on the select one, each one has an attribute value that if we go back up here to the script, post name, right? So that mail message right there, variable, that then, that's the, there's the variable in use. So the mail function tries to send the message to whatever email address, right? Mike at Mikesankula wrote. So because I typed in Mike, just not my last name, but just my first name, what this script actually does is it goes and looks for the value that you typed into whatever input box that has the value of name, the value of email, the value of message. So that's where the hook is, if you want to say hook, name, email, subject, values for the subjects, message, etc. Okay, so that's how the script and the form actually connects to work together. Does that make sense? Okay. As well, so we are only today going to be using the text box, select menu, and text area, okay? Or, sorry, input field. There are other inputs for forms. Input tag. What was on this one? Let's see. HTML forms. Here it is. So we also have the radio buttons where we can select, right? Radio buttons, then if you select one, it deselects the others. So radio buttons are used for if you want to check off one and only one value, right? We then also have, does it have check boxes in here? Nope. Let's input types. There we go. We also have the checkbox type, right? Where you can select multiple values, right? In other words, if you want to say, I have a bike and a car, right? They're not mutually exclusive, right? And that's pretty much it for the inputs, right? And then we have the good old input type of submit that is the actual button that we can use to send. We also have text input boxes. We have password input boxes where if we then need to, for instance, have somebody put in a password, and you know how you get the little bullets when you put in a password, right? So if you then say input name password, type password, then it will put the little bullets instead of showing you what you're putting in there. We have radio buttons, like I said, the little circle ones. We have check boxes. We then have select menus, which if we go here, we are going to be using a select menu to then select a subject for our form. And that is using basically the select tag. And then inside the select tag, we will have options. And then lastly, we have message fields, which we use the text area tag for. So text areas and inputs are very, very similar in terms of they are fields that we can write text in. However, the difference with the text area is then I can make the text area as many columns wide and as many rows tall as I want to. For instance, if I want to have a text field that is by default, let's say a text field that shows that you can write in a paragraph or so of information, then that would be, let's see how many text area. So I used columns 40 and rows 5. So I believe the columns is just how many characters wide it is, and rows is how many lines tall it is. All right, so that's basically an overview of forms and how they work. Ready to do one? So what we're going to do to start off with is we are going to use our, guess what page we're going to use? I dare you to guess. You guys are smart, right? Come on, that was pretty dry. I got to make some fun, right? And open up my contact page. Sorry, my computer is getting a little hot. I need to put something underneath it. Some airflow in there. And in terms of where I'm going to put the form, I'm just going to go ahead and in the text div, I am just going to go and delete all of the body copy. So I'm going to leave my H2 contact header level 2 there. Save that. Let's go now and keep that one open. Faculty. Go to 2017, go to my contact page, and there we go. I should have kind of a blank spot. So to start out with, go to my little script. So if you have looked at my lecture for today, or the lecture size, if you will, when I first wrote this up, I wrote it up using the WYSIWYG options in Dreamweaver because when I first started teaching this class, they wanted me to use Dreamweaver. That was part of the deal. And so I showed you guys how to do it kind of by the insert menus, but we're just going to type stuff out instead of using the insert menus. Because, well, I just think that you should learn how to type the HTML out. So, here's what we're going to do. So first we're going to type a which one?
We're getting a link that's sending us to contact form for your website -2. And that's better. Is anyone else in there?
From the schedule?
Yeah. You click on contact form for your website.
Yeah, that, this one right here? Let's see, what's going on here?
But it's only the 2.
Huh.
And it was fine.
Yeah, that, well, that's an error now, isn't it? Yeah. So the sidebar, let's show you how things work. This link right here is automatically generated. If I go to my schedule page, let's just fix it right now. If I go to my schedule page and I am doing a hyperlink that is inside the body copy or inside the body section there, it's text then that what I have to do is actually type in the link there, so it's not automatically generated. So if I do that now, and who knows why it changed from 2 to not 2. Maybe I did that at one point in time. My OCD takes over sometimes, and I have to do stuff like that. How many of you have ever made an edit, or how many of you know this little poem? 99 little bugs in the code, 99 little bugs in the code. Take one down, fix it around, 135 little bugs in the code. Anybody? No? So in other words, if you fix one thing, it may create other bugs all the way around, is kind of my, so if I update that now, let's see if it works. Let's see. Ah. Yep. So I probably just changed it and broke it. Thomas is supposed to go through my pages right before class to see if all my links work. Get it. It's not the first broken link. It won't be the last, is what I'm saying. So now we go to XRIs. Yay! Okay. So again, what I initially did was I used screenshots of how to then go and insert things using Dreamweaver. You know, down the road, if you want to save some time and do that kind of stuff, you're welcome to do it. But let's just start typing things out. And so basically what we're going to do then is again, I am going to begin contact form. In contact form. Right. And I am going to use an opening form tag, and then I'm going to close it. And basically then what I want to do is create a few lines, and then I want to use the attributes action. And this is where what I'm basically going to do is for the action, we're just going to reload contact.php. Okay. And right now, well, let's say it like this. This action is going to then rely on the submit button to pull that action. But if we go back to here, and let's say that when we go to this page, why, when this page loads, does nothing happen? Why is it only when you hit the submit button that you get it trying to validate the form fields, etc.? Anybody tell me?
HTML is static and JavaScript is something.
Yes, and yes, but we're going to use PHP.
Yeah.
Okay, so in other words, you're absolutely right. The answer I'm looking for, though, is that this PHP script is not running because we've put it in a conditional that says, did you to run this stuff? Because we haven't clicked the submit button, it's just going to load this as a static form, right? So yeah, we could also, instead of using PHP to run this form, we could use JavaScript to run this form, right? I've got an old example of that somewhere that if we have time after this is over, I can show it to you, but I'm not going to go look for that right now. So right now then, we want to say form action. We want to say method, and we are going to use the post method. In other words, we are going to send post data, right? And lastly, we are going to start using the name attributes. Okay? And this name attribute, we can just say contact. This is the one name attribute that it doesn't matter if we use or not. In other words, nowhere in this script up here are we relying on the name attribute. But because I've been using name attributes all the way through, we're just going to use name attribute for that. We could as well, if we wanted to, right, give this an ID of contact form if we want. In other words, if we want to, just like we have these other elements that have IDs on them, if we want to say we want to access an element within this ID to style it via CSS, we can, right? Or we can use a class to do that as well. But basically for our exercise, these two things right here are not necessary, but I just type them in there and I don't feel like deleting them. I'll just leave them there. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to start using our input fields, okay? And so for our input fields then, notice that it basically has an opening tag, and all that there are in this tag are attributes like this. There is no text element. In other words, if we have an opening label tag, which we'll get to in a second, and a closing label tag, we then have a text element inside. Okay, but for an input field, we do things a little bit different. So we are going to say input type, and for type we have all the different types, right? So if we wanted to make this a checkbox, if we wanted to make this an email field, if we wanted to make this a password or a radio or even a submit button, we could choose those. We're just going to choose for this one straight up text. Right? We then want to use the name attribute on this one, okay? And the name attribute, this is again where, if we go back here, this name attribute of name is going to be used when we try to pull the data from that field, okay? So that's where, at this point in time, it is important that if you wanted to say here, whole name, first name, last name, if you wanted to abbreviate it, FN, LN, or whatever you could, the only thing is when you write the script, this is just like when you use JavaScript to pull a class, to find something by a class name or find something by ID name, or get element by ID or get element by class name. This form is basically getting this input box by name attributes. Okay. And lastly, this is where we want to say required. Now, with saying required, there's two ways of doing this. If I just type out required like that as an attribute, right? Remember when we talked about how XHTML, you couldn't use minimized attributes? Does anybody remember that from way back? No? Required, and as an attribute, and the value of the attribute is required, right? If I just use it like this, from my understanding, that is a minimized attribute, right? If the attributes and the value are the same, okay? So HTML5 lets you do this. When we test this, we'll see if it works. And if it doesn't, we'll go back to doing it the long way, right? But you can either say required equals required, or from what I understand, just use the required attribute, and that's that. So if we save this now, and we go to our form, yay, we have an input box. But we don't have any kind of headline or a label for our input box, okay? So there are a couple of different ways to do it. You could, for instance, say H3 name, right, like that. But when you are using forms, it is much more semantically correct to use the label. field. So typically, when I'm doing forms, I'll use the label field. If we go to here, input tag, label tag. All right. So if we go down here and I say HTML label tag, this is where then the syntax, or let's say for semantics, using a label and then saying for, right? So if this input field then has the ID of male or value of male, right? We can use the for attribute here and then for our label. So let's go and just for semantics, right? We are going to say for name. Now, this may or may not really do anything. In other words, if you look at the hook here where it says for male, right? It hooks into the value here, right? For female hooks into the value, right? Not necessarily the name of whatever the input is. So we could then, if we wanted to, right? If we wanted to have a default value for our input text box, in other words, if I go back here and I save this, I now have the label for name and I have an empty text box. What if I wanted to put a value into that text box? Have you come across forms where there's already a value in there? Right. Value, name, right? So now if I do that, that's where then that value is in there, and then I would have to delete it like that. If you want a value in there, then that when you focus on it, right, it removes that value. Let's see, we did that last year. Yeah, I can't remember it off the top of my head. Placeholder, that's right. So now if I put something in there and then I hover over it, right, it still is grayed out, right? You still see it until you start typing over it, right? So, but typically, I'm not going to use that, right? Typically, when I'm doing stuff, I basically just use these, and that's pretty much it. It'll still work, right? So the unfortunate thing, though, is that now that we have our label, right, notice that our label has no styling applied to it. As well, you can see that both the label and the input field, right, are what level elements? Inline level elements, okay? I know that's kind of a confusing one, right? But I want to make the label a block level element and actually look like my H3s. So if I'm going to do that, Open up my style sheet. Go to, no, Dreamweaver. I don't need you to tell me more. Things on the web are getting really annoying, right? Every time I do something on Pandora, it's always telling me like, ooh, did you know? And I want to reply that, did you know that I don't care? So basically what I'm going to do is, you know, I'm actually not going to do a multiple selector there. I'm going to say content label, have its color, right? But this is where then I need to say display block, right? So that it will sit. In other words, I could have done this. Right? I could have said content H3 content label, right? To have the same styles here. But the only difference is, so I could do it like this, actually. In other words, content H3, content label. I always do things a little bit differently quarter to quarter. Content H3, content label, have color, purple, font size 18, padding top, margin bottom, so on and so forth. But I want the label tag to go from display inline to display block. So I'm going to write a selector after that and do it like that. So if we go back here, contact.php, styles, content label. See what's going on here. Am I having a caching issue again? There we go. Wow, Chrome is getting annoying with their caching. That's happening to me more and more. Has that been happening to you guys too? Have you been having to clear out your cache like that? No? Huh? Really? Man. I'm telling you, man, it's really time to quit and move out to the woods. Who wants to go? Anybody? Yeah? Say it again?
You have to define margin bottom or margin.
The screen that's not showing outline of the film and projector. It's the projector. Click outside of it. Almost.
Well, let's fix that. Let's style our input boxes. Content, inputs, border, 1 pixel, solid. Let's purple. Right, and then let's go grab that purple. Is that what you're saying? You couldn't see the yeah. So yeah, this projector is, but typically I style my input boxes as well, because here's what I'm saying. If we look at this input box and we start typing stuff in there, that input box looks really kind of wild. right? So what I typically do is I will, on the input boxes, give it a border color and give it a padding of something, right? And I can even do this, width, 100%, so that it then goes all the way out to the edge, right? Let's not do with 100% right now, but let's just, ooh, we could also do this. Padding to border, border radius pixels. So now we have, let's do a little more padding than that. Padding, 4 pixels. There we go. So now, right, we could also give the inputs boxes their own text size, etc. In other words, this looks kind of small, right? I could say content inputs, font size as well, right? 18 pixels if I wanted to, so that now, right? I'm going to go back to 16. So in line height, I'm just going to get rid of. There we go. Oh, sorry. Away notification. All right, getting back to what we should be doing. Let's go back to contact.php. So now I have my label and my inputs type for text and name. So this is where then let's just start putting together the other fields. In other words, we now need to go and do an email, a subject, a message, and a submit. So I'm going to start off with label. 4, even though the 4 really isn't going to do anything at this point in time. Email, email, right? And then I'm going to have another input, type, text, name, email, required. Save that. Go back here. Go back to what we're doing today. And now we should have our 2 form fields. So next what we can do is we can do a select menu like this, right? Or we could do a radio if we wanted to. The big thing is when we do this, again, if we go back to here, whatever we do, if we did a radio button or a select menu or checkboxes wouldn't necessarily work in this instance because we need to pick one and one definitively. So our 2 options are radio buttons or select menu. I'm just going to go with the select menu. And here's the thing. This is where then we need to have name, subject, same thing, match the subject up here because that's what we're going to be calling. Okay. So if we did a radio input, we would have to do the same thing. So select, whoops, I forgot my label. Label 4, subject, subject, label, select menu, name, subject, down, and do a closing select, because we then need inside here options. Okay, so this is where then our options, we do need to have two things. A value, right? That this value then gets sent to the email. This right here, this text that appears then inside doesn't get sent. And here's what I mean. If I say option, value, general inquiry, general, right? If I save this now, and I go back to viewing it, I now have one option under my select menu with the text that says general. But if this actually got sent, it's not going to use that text that shows up on the button. It's going to use this value field to actually send where it says general inquiry. So remember that when I sent this off and it says stupid inquiry right here, that gets pulled from this value. But I want them to match up. So I'm going to say general inquiry, right? I'm going to do another option, value, another inquiry, and lastly, option, value, last inquiry. I lied. For some reason, I was just compelled to do an option called cheeseburgers. I have no idea why. Maybe I'm hungry. You can do whatever options you want. Okay. So now the thing is, so if we go back here, I have general inquiry, another, last, cheeseburgers. But notice that this doesn't look styled like my input field. So I'm going to go back to my CSS and content inputs. I am also going to do another selector saying contents select. Let's see, do I have to go and... This is going to get really annoying if I'm going to have to clear my browsing data every time. That's going to kill me. It's really going to kill me. I'm also going to, on the bottom of these inputs, just like if they were paragraph tags, say margin bottom and pixels. So we have a little bit of space between the labels. There we go. All right. Lastly, or not lastly, we got 2 more to go. Right? We have our text field. Does somebody have a question? I heard somebody.
You have to see
Yeah. Again, I do these differently every quarter. You know. Look, I'm not even following my script anymore. I'm going rogue. Good? Okay. So now we have name, email, general inquiry. If we wanted one of these to be the default one, in other words, it's going to default to the top one. But let's say, right, selected, isn't it? If I do the attribute selected there, cheeseburger should now be the default one. I'm going to get rid of that and just go and put that back up here. Again, this is one of those minimized attributes where it could be the way I've written it in the past. Selected equals selected. But so that is a non-minimized attribute. Again, if I just want it to say selected, I can. So we have 2 more to go. Text area and a button. Text area. And this is where then we can style it, or not style it, but I'll show you. Text area, name, equals, message. And this is where if I just leave it without these, right? And I may have made a mistake here. Let's see what happens. It still works. Aha! Look at that, though. I was just testing something out. Here's what I was testing out. I did a text area with only an opening tag. Even though there's no text in there, we need to close the text area tag. So that we don't get anything in there. So again, it basically is an inline level element. So we need to now add to our CSS styles where we want to change it to block. We want to then say content text area. So now that is block as well. Oh. Forgot to use my label. What happens when I go off my script? Label, for, message, label, text area. Right. I'm going to want to give the text area the same styling as that. Up there. Go back to my styles. Content, text area, get a border, some padding. Right. But again, it's not too big of a text area by default, right? So if we wanted to make this much bigger, then we could go and add the columns attributes. And if I said 100, and then I said rows, let's say 10, let's just make it relatively big. That is then where, oh, look at that, that's huge. Huh? Let's go columns, let's go back to what I had earlier. Columns 40, rows 5. And now we have message, field, etc. And as well, we want to then say required. And notice the required, whoops, the required isn't really doing anything yet because we haven't gotten to the actual methodology or to the button that actually sends the form. Now, in previous quarters, I've used the input tag and said type submit, value submit, etc. There used to be no button tag a while ago. So now if we go to back to the lecture that I should be totally, again, here's my script that I'm just doing the stuff, but not going back and forth to it. Before HTML5, for submit buttons, we still used input. Now, the only thing about using an input tag is if I've already styled an input tag like this. Let's use an input tag to start out with and see what happens. I'm not going to use a label here. Input, type, submit, name, submit. And this is where I do want a value. And I'll just use the value of submit for right now. So if I use the input tag, and go back here, now my submit button looks like has the border like everything else, but it also has the default gray of a submit button. So if I wanted to style this differently than those input tags, I could do one of two things. Now that there is a button tag, I could simply change the input field to a button tag, or there is also in CSS, see where CSS by selector by attributes. So we can actually call a tag, and instead of a class or an ID, call it by the selector and the value of that selector. So let's see, I think I have that in my school theme somewhere. Pretty sure I do. There it is. So if I wanted to style things, right, I could say input type equals text, type equals email, type equals submit, type password, etc. But now that there's the button tag, instead, I am going to change this to button. If I go back here, right? Let's see. Could have sworn I put a link to the button tag in here. Hold on. Maybe I didn't. Sworn I did. Just before class. It's not there, is it? If I go to the button tag, that's what it is. Instead of the value, we actually put text in it like that. I don't usually use button tags, but I thought I'd do that tonight instead. I got to make it interesting for myself, right? Yay, right? But that's a really dainty, stupid looking little submit, right? Let's do this. Content. Button. So we can style it like these other ones. Don't forget your commas between your multiple selectors like that. Killing me, Chrome. Killing me. Killing me. Okay. And what I want to do then is, as well, contents button color, I'm going to make the text. Oops. Left for whites and color. Use the good old purple. Okay, so that looks more like a real submit button, doesn't it? So now, if we don't have any values in our fields because we've used the required attributes in HTML5, it's going to make sure that we type stuff out. However, in the email address field, take a look at this. Let's see if it catches that as a non, oh, did I say type email on that one? Let's see. What was that? Yeah, no, but it should be checking that this is a valid email address. That's what I'm saying. So input, type, aha. I just used text. Type, email. In other words, let's say it like this. If I wanted to do this. Password, type, password. So let's refresh this by actually hitting the contact link. Again, if I please fill out this field, it checks to see if there's something in there. Submit, please fill out this field. If I put something in there, then HTML5 form validation is going to say, hey, please include an @ symbol, and then if I do that, it's going to probably say I need a dot. Oh, that passed. Really? Interesting. Well, remember how I said that we used to do this with JavaScript, right? Let's show you an example of that. So this would check to see, we got an alert that says, don't insult me with that generic name, right? If I put in a real name, but then didn't have an email address, it actually checks that it's a valid email address. So if I show you the code for that real quick. Email validation HTML. Screwed up a whole lot of my stuff. Let's go back. Maybe I won't be able to find it. Scripts. Contact. Yeah. So here is where you were saying JavaScript, right? Where it would look for the position of where the @ symbol is and make sure there's at least 2 characters after the period, right, to make sure that it was a valid email address, right? But we can get away with just doing it in HTML5 generically like that. Okay, but one way, shape, or form, we do have a working contact form that if I put in Mike, email Mike at Mike, I put in a password that I don't even need. Let's make sure that the password is not required. It's not really going to do anything. I'm actually going to delete the password out of there. I just wanted to show you that if you did use the password type, it would do the bullets like that. So I'm going to go ahead and delete password out of there. So we have name, email, subject. Name, Mike, email, Mike. Subject, cheeseburgers, like tacos. Submit. Great. It submitted it, or at least it got past validation. But because we don't have any script handling it, if I go then to my email here, yo. So somebody and tested my form, right? Or did somebody test my form from, yeah? Okay. Here's the thing. You're busted. No. You know how many I get of those? Again, we don't then have I don't need to do an HTML comment, but we don't have a script along with it. So do we have time to type all this stuff out today? Yeah? You want to go for it? All right. Here's what we're going to do. Let's make sure I have the script all kind of set out in front of me. All right. First of all, we want a conditional. So let's do our PHP script opening tag. Come down here a little bit, and let's say that we put in a comment, form script. If. And again, we want to, for our if statement, the way that we do the syntax for an if statement is if condition is true, statement. So here for the condition, we are going to use isSet. Okay. Basically, isSet is, I'm not going to go to the PHP website. You can kind of look these things up on your own time. But basically, isSet is right? Or when you click the button, is it going to, right? So is set then has its own arguments or its own condition that then uses the global post variable. And if you remember, the brackets mean what? Programmers? An array. So the post variable accepts an array, I guess, of stuff that basically we are going to look for submit. So I'm not 100% clear on how, well, let's just say it like this. Our array that we would be looking through, and I'm not sure if this is accurate, but we'd be looking through name, email, subject, or message. Does that make sense? So we're looking for the or submit. Okay, so we are saying if the submit button has been clicked, then we can do this. Let's use a print statement. Okay, and we can do print statement in different methodologies, but if I say, hey, good job, right? Now, if I go, what's the error I'm getting there? Syntax error. That's it on the statement. Programmers, I like programmers. I always forget semicolons. #1 programming error, isn't it? Yeah. I'm not immune. I'm human. So now if I go back to here and I reload this and I put in stuff, right, and hit submit, it's going to say, hey, good job. But basically, it still didn't send me the email, right? But if I want to have this message say, hey, good job, Mike, right? And put it in a p tag, okay? I need to then do I have that right? Thank you for contacting me. I have that in double quotes, don't I? Well, let's just do it like this. Hey, good job, comma, brackets, is it brackets? Post name. Doesn't look right to me. I'll go double check my no print, thanks. Oh, all right. I should have used concatenation there, but let's just go POST brackets. Name in brackets. I'm going to go and use the double quotes here instead. Maybe that's the syntax. Yeah. I'm using a different syntax than I normally use. Let me just test this out real quick. Print. Actually, I'm going to do echo. And I am then going to say, hey, good job. And I should be using concatenation. Do. Let's see what this does. Long form. Syntax 13. Interesting. Just use the way I have it. It's a little bit different syntax than I'm used to, but nonetheless, figure it out later. Name, Mike, email. Spelled it wrong, I don't care. Test. Submit. Hey, good job, Mike. Right, so this then is going to go and grab the value of the name field and print it to the screen.
We don't need that.
No. This is kind of an old script that uses a different syntax than I'm used to. In other words, it might be because I'm using the post variables, where, let me just show you what I'm talking about. The syntax that I'm used to is when I'm writing something to the screen, I typically use echo and then a single quotes and text. And then if I need to say, for instance, echo, single quote, HTML stuff like this. What I would do is I would close this with a single quote and I would use concatenation, meaning if I need to pull a variable like main, right, in between written text like that, I would close it, use a dot, put in the variable, close the dot, open up the string again, close the string. So basically, if I needed to pull a variable inside of a string value, so essentially this is a string value that I am writing to the screen. But if I need to use some kind of a variable like go get whatever main pages stuff, get the ID, get the number of it, right? Then I would close the string value, use a period, write the variable, end with a period, open up the string value again. That's called concatenation, right? So this right here is an older script from a long time ago that has a different syntax where you can use the print function, and notice that the print function then is using parentheses operators, where possibly I would have to actually look into this. This is what threw me, that because I am using a string value here, right? Am I using concatenation by opening up these brackets? That might be the way that you concatenate if you are using parentheses operators and double quotes. Did that make any sense to anybody? No? Okay. Again, there's different syntaxes for a lot of different things. I'm just going to use the syntax that I've written out here because that's what I've got written and I don't want to deviate from it. But again, it's a different syntax that I'm used to day to day. But I also want to use the mail function, right? So again, the mail function then is what is actually going to send mail off, okay? So this is where in order to send mail, right, or in order to send something, make sure I use my semicolon, I don't have any values set up right now. So I could say, in other words, if I want to send mail to whatever recipient, I could say, right, send the mail to that email address. Okay, but I want to use a few different values, meaning I want to send something to a recipient that is an email address. I want to use a subject that we've put in there. I want to actually have a message. And I want it to go to or be from a sender. So what I need to do now is, for this mail function, I can just put in the recipient as that value, email address. But that's impractical. Again, we want to use variables that have values so that we can use those variables kind of as shorthand. So we want to have a recipient, a subject, a message, and a sender. Okay? So we need to go set those up first. Let's start off by saying mail, message. Again, I am going to use just the syntax that I've been using in my lecture here. Use the parentheses operators, and I am going to use double quotes and say brackets pull using the post methodology and say message. Oops. I forgot to then have this in the single quotes. Aha, I spotted why I'm using double quotes here, because I'm using single quotes right there, right? Maybe that is the way you can make that stuff. I'm just talking to myself, don't worry about it. So I'm going to set out that I have a mail message, and that mail message then is going to pull whatever I wrote or whatever I wrote in the text area, because we're using message here as the name value. Go set up the other ones. Mail subject. Equals. Quotes. Brackets. Again, we have to say using the post methodology. What are we going to use here? What's the value? Huh? Subject. Again, don't forget your semicolon. So I'm using parentheses up here because I'm going to be using multiple, right? So let's actually get rid of this real quick. See if that works, right? In other words, up here I'm going to be using multiple stuff, like, well, let's just go back and do it. Where is it? Post name. So I'm going to say brackets. Post name wrote message. In other words, it's going to pull Mike wrote message. So here, did I use? No, I didn't. I'll bet you it's not going to matter if I do it like that. But what I have written in my notes is this. So if now we want to use the mail function to send mail subject, mail message. Okay. So far, it'll write out the subject and the message, but we don't have any email address to send it to. So, mail recipient. Typically, I let you guys copy and paste the script in this class, but we're being brave when we're writing it out. Mail recipient, this is where, don't put my address in, please. Put yours in. And I'm going to go back and say mail recipients. Did I spell that right? Mail recipient. All right. So now, hopefully, Mike, email Mike at Mike, SINKULA.com, talking about cheeseburgers. I'm hungry. Submit. Hey, good job, Mike. You sent an email. So hopefully here in my inbox, subject, cheeseburgers. Mike wrote, I'm hungry. The only thing is, you may or may not notice that, look at the from address. It doesn't say Mike at mikesankhula.com. Okay, so if you don't put a from recipient in there, it is going to send it from whatever your server email address is, right? So that's where the last one, mail recipient, I want it to also say mail sender equals. And this is where we need to specify the header, the whoop, double quotes. We need to say it's from. Again, using post, oops, post, and email. Don't forget semicolon, mail recipient, mail subject, mail message, and mail sender. I can't remember, but I think, let's look it up. Mail. I think these have to be in a certain order for it to work correctly. Let's take a look. Two, subject, message, additional headers. Yep, I think it has to be in that order. So we could write it out to that email address with your subject and with a message. I should actually link to this function in my lecture. You want to hit that, Thomas? Under where in the contact form, the script part of it, right? But we can then say to subject, et cetera, right? Anyhow, if you got this far, like, general inquiry, sup, submit. Go to my inbox. And now I should see a general inquiry that actually has a from in there. Make sense? Anyhow, sorry about the syntax throwing me off. I should look into that because this is a relatively old script that might be using an older syntax that I just don't use day to day. Yeah, that whole concatenation thing there threw me off a little bit. I could also say, make that bold. You can edit this to you know, make it however you want. You can, you know, write out whatever message you want here. You can say mail message, post name, wrote. So this is where I could say name, whose email is, wrote, etc. Right? You can use those however you want. But if you basically, you know, and like I said, in quarters gone by, I've just let students copy and paste the script from the lecture, but we got done earlier than usual. So
wanted to know later, go in and press submit, then would it be, so it's like, right now it's if, and it kind of prints out the thing?
Yeah.
So like an if and then like a directional.
You could, or you could send it to another page that has that script in it, right? That will parse that post data. Yeah. I have an old version of this where, yeah. I have an old version of this where you could also do it like this. So what this means is, so if I save this now, and we go to the one we did today, right? That form is there, but now if I'm going to use fake email addresses, mike@pike.com, and I hit submit. Now the form should be gone once it, because I put it outside of that if conditional, right? So if then when it, maybe there's errors in here, right? But oh, it didn't do it. Yeah. There's a way that you can put the form inside of the script, just like you're doing all this other stuff. I mean, basically you can write PHP scripts however you want to, you know. In other words, if we go and look at, yeah, inside the script, kind of like where here I have, you know, so this is like my main menu that I'm getting, and I have HTML all, you know, being echoed to the page, right? So you could make it all as complex as that. Yeah, in other words, you can do whatever you want. You would just have to program it like that. Does that make sense? And I have an old version that did it that way. And I deleted it off of my website because I didn't use it anymore. But anyhow, if you have gotten this far, consider yourself done. Did everybody get this typed out this way? Yeah? I should do some tests on the syntax there, but whatever. It's one way of doing it. So now you have a contact form. And we've run 5 minutes over. So I'm hungry for cheeseburgers. Did I get your name? It's Paula, right? Did I get your name on tape? Did you hear me say it? Yeah? Okay. As I said it, I'm like, God damn it, I hope that's her name. Because with Anna, I said Ann, Anna, Anna, one of those three. She took it in stride, though. She didn't care. Look at her. She doesn't even care right now. She's like, whatever, dude. I'm hungry for cheeseburgers. Let me go. All right. Well, time to stop the recording. In closing, I'd like to say cheeseburgers.